Okay, carbon dioxide. So there are two main gases that we really talk about when it comes to freediving. The first one is oxygen, and the second one is carbon dioxide. So we know in the previous video that one of the byproducts that our body creates when it utilizes or uses oxygen is carbon dioxide. So interestingly enough, your body does not have any receptors that let you know how much oxygen you have left. Your body does have receptors though to let you know when you have too much CO2 or when you have an increase in CO2, in carbon dioxide. So I'm going to draw a graph. This is the graph to end all graphs, the one graph to rule them all.
One ring to rule them all.
I'll probably have Erin animate this to make it look prettier, but I'll draw it up while I'm doing this video because I'm so accustomed to teaching with this graph that it will help me explain the concept the best. So this line going across is time, okay? This is our breath hold period going across. Now this top line here is our percentage of O2. Now, you will start every single one of your dives with 100% O2. Now, the body is more or less completely oxygenated at any given stage of your life. So this thing of special breathing techniques to oxygenate the body, these things don't actually exist. Your body is as oxygenated as it can ever be at every stage of your life. If we were to measure your O2 saturation, and you can do those with little O2 saturation meters, they have them in the hospital, you know, the things that you put your finger into. If we were to measure your O2 saturation at any given stage of your life, it would be between 97 to 100% saturated. Now, those few percentiles are negligible. Like you'll fluctuate between that. But you should never be below that 97 percentile, or in some cases 96 and 95, but yeah, most people are above 97% oxygenated at all times. So there's no such thing as putting more oxygen into your body. There's no such thing as breathing that will oxygenate you. You are 100% saturated at all times. Now, even after a dive, let's say you do a breath hold. How long will it take for you to go from being depleted of O2 during that breath hold to bang, being full of O2 again? Around 30 odd seconds. It takes about 30 odd seconds to completely replenish your body's arterial oxygen saturation. So in that case, you have replenished your body with the O2 within about 30 odd seconds. So I'm going to assume that you're having at least 30 seconds of breathing in between your breath holds or recovery time on the surface. And so you are saturated on every single dive. Every single dive you've ever done, you have done it with more or less 100% O2 in your body. Now, while you always start with 100% O2, you can start with whatever amount of CO2 that you like. So down here is our little CO2 line. This bottom line is CO2. This top line represents O2. Now, as we start our breath hold, our O2 gets used up. Oh, my graph is going crazy, until eventually you get to this point where you black out. Oh, straighten up, buddy. Good. So, start our dive with 100%, go along, it's getting used up, and then bang, you run out of O2, or you do not have sufficient oxygen to maintain normal bodily function, and your brain goes, oh, time to black out. And it blacks you out as a form of protection and prevention of death. So that's what happens there. Now, you can start your dives with whatever level of CO2 that you want. Basically, every time you inhale, you put gas in your lungs for CO2 to mix into and to escape with. So the amount that you breathe before a breath hold or before a dive will directly affect how much carbon dioxide you have in your body, in your bloodstream, in your lungs. Now, we're going to get onto some more complex stuff to do with carbon dioxide, but in the beginning, we're just going to say that your body does actually need carbon dioxide to hold its breath for its maximal period of time. So you don't want to get rid of all the carbon dioxide. We'll talk about that in a lot more detail very soon. So, let's say right here is the ideal level of CO2 that we want to start our dives with. So as I'm holding my breath, I'm holding my breath, I'm holding my breath, and my body is burning O2 or utilizing O2 or whatever metaphor you want to create for it, your body is creating CO2. And that's rising, 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 and eventually you hit this critical point. And that point is where your body says, we have too much CO2, we need to get rid of it. And then it gives us what we refer to as the urge to breathe. Now, the urge to breathe, I don't really like calling it that because it's not actually your body's need to respirate or your body's need for more oxygen. It's just your body's desire to purge, to get rid of carbon dioxide. So it gives you this feeling, this horrible feeling of, you probably know what I'm talking about. And we call it the urge to breathe, but it's really just an excess of carbon dioxide. So the average untrained human can hold their breath for around 5 minutes. That is if you are doing a static breath hold and in a state of complete relaxation. So if you were to lay down on the floor, completely immobile, not moving, take a huge breath in and hold your breath, you'd be able to hold your breath for around 5 minutes before you blacked out. That's the average untrained human. Now, that's average. And there are some people that can hold their breath for 6 or 7 minutes. There are some people that can only hold their breath for 3 or 4 minutes. It's somewhere in between there, and it really depends on how relaxed you are. When I say 5 minutes, I mean in a state of complete relaxation. That's how long, that's how the human body can hold its breath for 5 minutes on average when they're untrained. So in this graph, if the point in which I'm going to black out is after a 5 minute static breath hold, when am I going to experience the urge to breathe? When is my body going to say, oh, we have too much carbon dioxide, we need to get rid of it? That's going to happen at around, now keep in mind, these figures I give you, these are averages, okay? These are guesstimations to give you guys an idea, but everybody's body will be completely different. So they're going to be around 25 to 35% of the way through your body's maximal breath hold time. So if your maximum breath hold time was 5 minutes, at about 25%, maybe around 35%, your body is going to give you the urge to breathe. Now, that's going to be a physical and psychological feeling. So along with the stress and the desire to breathe, or really the desire to exhale carbon dioxide, your body is going to also give you contractions. Now, what's actually going on here is that your respiratory muscles are contracting to make you exhale CO2. When we exhale, our intercostal muscles, the muscles here around our rib cage, they contract inward to push the air out. And that's also what's going on when we are having contractions. Mostly our intercostal muscles are contracting to try to force us to exhale. You may also experience this or feel this like a tugging in the throat. If you feel a tugging in the throat, that's also the contractions. We all experience it slightly differently. Sometimes people don't feel their intercostals or their respiratory muscles. They don't feel them contracting, and they feel it only in the throat. I promise you, your respiratory muscles are contracting, otherwise you wouldn't feel anything in the throat. But primarily, people are experiencing contracting in the respiratory muscles right there. So in normal life, when we are just moving around, running, whatever kind of exercise that we do, as our body uses the O2 and then creates CO2, we just exhale it. The only difference is when we're diving, we don't allow our bodies to exhale. So it builds up and it builds up and it builds up. So we start our dive, our body utilizes the O2, creates CO2, and eventually your body will get to the point where it says, okay, that's enough, that's a lot of CO2, and we want to breathe now, go back up. And it gives you this feeling of panic, a potential feeling of stress, and it gives you contractions of your respiratory muscles to force you to exhale. Now, these contractions are involuntary. You can't stop them from happening. You can't control them. And that's a huge reason why some people feel stressed with breath holds, is because when else in your life does your body do things without you telling it to do it? You don't usually have involuntary movements. Usually we tell our bodies to do something, like here, wave, and the body waves. In almost no case in life will the body start contracting or moving a muscle without us telling it to do so. So a huge part of the stress that we experience or feel when we are having contractions is simply just that we are not accustomed to our body taking over and moving on its own. Now, because we don't have any receptors in our body that let us know how much oxygen we have left, we have to rely on the signals that we get from carbon dioxide. So when we do get the urge to breathe and when we do start to have contractions, we know that we're about 25 to 35% of the way through our maximal breath hold time. Now, keeping in mind, when you're fun diving, you don't want to go anywhere near this maximum time, nowhere near it. In fact, when I'm doing my training, if I do a dive that's close to my max, I do 1 dive per day, and that is enough to completely fatigue my body. So just be aware that how stressful and how demanding a maximum breath hold is. So when you are training, when you are fun diving, when you're doing all the, when you're there exploring the ocean, we try not to go anywhere near our maximal time. And what I'm going to recommend is that when you start getting the urge to breathe, that's when you start to make your way back up. When the contractions begin, start swimming upward. There's no need to go near 100%. Go to 30%, go to 40%, go to 50% if you're feeling really good or you're going down a little bit deeper. But if you're going to be diving all day, that's as far as you're going to want to go. Otherwise, you're going to seriously stress your body out and you're going to seriously fatigue it. You'll wear your body out. So, just to recap, our body uses O2. It creates CO2 as a byproduct. And that CO2 builds up in our body until a certain point, and then it gives us the desire to breathe. It signals to us that we need to start breathing again. Our body doesn't give us any signals that we don't have enough oxygen. When you're about to run out of oxygen, you'll simply black out and you won't know it's coming. You won't even remember that you've had a blackout. In fact, if someone doesn't tell you that you've blacked out, you won't remember it happening, and you'll just, the last thing you'll remember was that you were below the surface, and the next thing you know, you were above the surface, and your brain will just piece it together like, oh yeah, I made that dive, I'm on the surface. If I don't tell someone, like a dive buddy of mine, that they've had a blackout, they usually have no idea that it's happened. So it's a strange kind of thing. So our body is giving us the urge to breathe. Now, we still have a long period of time before we're actually going to be unconscious. We have a long period of time before we're going to black out. So a lot of freediving training, a lot of getting better at freediving is really just about growing to become accustomed to an increasing urge to breathe and growing more comfortable with having contractions. And the best way to do that is to simply not push yourself, just to allow yourself to slowly progress at your own rate and never demand big breath holds from yourself, never push your body to do more than it's ready to. And when I say more than it's ready to, I mean more than you feel comfortable with. Like, you don't want to experience more discomfort than you're ready to feel in that moment of time. That's something that's going to set you back in your freediving ability. We utilize O2, we create CO2, we get to the point in time where our body has so much CO2 it gives us the urge to breathe, and then we have contractions of our respiratory muscles. They usually begin small, slow, soft, and they get harder, bigger, faster, until you breathe again, or until you do black out. But if we're not going to that eventuality, we're going just until you breathe again, because there is no need to black out in freediving. Blackouts in recreational freediving almost never happen. They're very, very rare. There's no need for it to happen. No one ever needs to black out. There are world champions in freediving that have never had a blackout before, just so you know. So it's not something that even goes hand in hand with deep or competitive freediving. Anytime a freediver blacks out, it's because they overestimated their ability or because they mismanaged their training or the situation, which is what we're trying to avoid here. So those contractions will continue until you breathe again. So even though you might find them a little bit stressful or weird in the beginning, I promise you will grow more comfortable with them. I remember when I first started freediving, the contractions used to really stress me out, and now they don't bother me whatsoever. I can have contractions all day long and I'm fine with it. It's something that you will grow more accustomed to. You may even start to like them. And then when you exhale and start breathing again, the contractions will stop. Now there is so much more to talk about when it comes to gas theory, when it comes to carbon dioxide and the other roles that it plays in the body. But for now, we're going to keep it simple. Carbon dioxide is what gives you the urge to breathe. The urge to breathe has nothing to do with the amount of oxygen you have left. It's only the amount of carbon dioxide that you have in your body, in your lungs. And we're going to wrap up the video there, and we're going to move on to the next topic. So you might be thinking, well, if carbon dioxide is what gives me the urge to breathe, is what gives me that desire to breathe, that horrible feeling, why don't I just breathe a lot more before my dive? And so I'll have less carbon dioxide in my body, and then I'll be able to dive for a longer period of time without getting the urge to breathe. That sounds pretty logical. The next video is going to be about hyperventilation, and we're going to talk about why that's a very bad idea.